Hi everybody, this is Sally Chang, and I'm going to start this talk with a salutation of respect from the martial arts tradition. For any of you who are tuning in, respect is a big part of martial arts. And for those of you who aren't martial artists, maybe you wouldn't even know. Maybe that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you. But martial arts is the art of conflict and combat. And they aren't necessarily the same thing. It's really about being in relationship with other people in difficult times when you may have conflicting points of view and conflicting opinions, and you may not even have a shared reality, but you're in a situation where you're seeking a resolution to this. In battlefield martial arts, it's often about winning or conquering, or even if it's in sport martial arts, ring fighting, MMA, whatever it might be, it's often about conquering and winning. In my lineages of martial arts, it's really about understanding the nature of reality, to deepen our self-connection, to know ourselves better and with more honesty and truthfulness, to connect with our authentic beings in an unfiltered way, and to learn how to conduct ourselves with respect and honor. And if we happen to be in a situation where physical confrontation is necessary, that we have the skills to manage it while still being in connection with our authentic selves and with our values. In other words, it's not about Jekyll and Hyde. It's not about being a nice person at home and then being a monster in the ring. It's not about being a nice person to one individual and then other individuals having a different standard. It's about a constant practice of interrogating ourselves individually and in relationship and in your practice community, and finding honest connection and a technique, a pathway, a posture, an energy, a power, an embodied expression to be in alignment physically, mentally, ethically, morally, spiritually, intellectually. That all of these things you don't separate, but you keep in consistent alignment. And then one cannot be had without the other, or else you are splitting yourself into pieces and you are not cultivating a true self, a whole self. So I don't practice the type of martial arts that is about solely winning and conquering. I understand that these are sports and these are aspirations of other people, but that is not my particular practice. So if you're interested in that, you're in the wrong place. There's plenty of other places to go to find an outlet for that aggression. But for me, martial arts is not about aggression. Martial arts is about unity, the internal and the external, the self, the other, and the larger relationship to community, society, and culture. I wouldn't say that being a martial artist or practicing martial arts is easy. It's not about finding ease. Martial arts, I think, especially the internal martial arts, has maybe a reputation promoted by some people that it is a way to check out, to become happy or blissful or joyful all the time, that it's about floating around in space and kind of qi dancing and dreaming, kind of inhabiting that space in between. I'm not against inhabiting that space, but that's not what internal martial arts is. In this moment of where we feel a lot of friction with our identities, our opinions, our perceptions, are on this precipice of change that maybe we didn't realize until we saw the murder of George Floyd by a police officer whose job and vow was to serve and protect all people. That this system of racism is the very air we've been breathing the whole time. That, in fact, systemic racism was part of our nation's architecture from the onset, from when this land was taken by force from the indigenous inhabitants, and then developed wealth and industry and power through and on the backs of slavery. And that those institutions have not fully left us. We have not risen above those institutions of colonialism, of conquering, of disrespecting, disregard, the taking of life, the aggression, the theft, and the enslavement of human beings. We have not outgrown that. We've forgotten. We have forgotten until this moment that that was what our country was built on. Or rather, some of us has forgotten. Some others of us are not able to forget ever, because they are the ancestors of those who were harmed. And it is really a moment of reckoning for our entire nation and our culture and us as individuals to begin to interrogate what that means for us. What is our responsibility to change this so that we can actually live up to the dreams and, in fact, the creed of this nation, to create a nation where all are treated equally and that all citizens are treated with equal rights, are given equal rights. And those basic tenets are not given equally in our nation. And that has been truly put to the forefront, in the spotlight, in the repeated media, emblazoned in our minds, because we've all been able to watch with horror. If you value humanity, you have witnessed the horror of this cold cruelty, of the abuse of power of this individual, and maybe are waking up to what systems are unfair and abused and broken, and how it keeps hurting us as a country, and it keeps dividing us as a culture. How do these things relate to practice, and what can we do? What can we do? What can we do? I think that is the main question that we are coming up against in these few weeks, since we've been awakened to the dark reality that Black people in America are facing and living with every single day, and have been for over 400 years. As a person of color, I will never know what the Black American experience is like. So I'm not going to pretend that our experiences are equal. There is probably some overlap in terms of the experience of racism in this country, but it's not the same. It's not the same for Asian Americans. It's not the same for Black people. It's not the same for Latinx people. It's not the same for anyone in between. All the shades. We all have our individual experience, and we all are being called in this moment to do the deep dive into our individual experience. This requires incredible courage and bravery. It requires courage to actually get out of our comfort zone and maybe even be willing to let go of some of the advantages and privileges we have inherited or even earned. As white Americans, there has been inherited privilege and advantage that has not been earned, has been taken, but perhaps has been quite unconscious, because the system of whiteness perhaps wasn't created by you, may have been created by people you related to, maybe not. But in any case, because you've been living here, you have been swimming in the advantage that is skewed towards whiteness. And this myth of whiteness being morally elevated or morally deserving of this advantage, it's an illusion. It's a construct. It was to create an unequal playing field. You know, that's it. That was the design from the beginning, was that people who were creating the rules and had the most power in the beginning wanted people like them, they associated with, to benefit the most. And the dehumanization of people who did not look like those in power caused a lot of harm and abuse and pain that continues, that we feel the effect of today, in this day and age. And time alone does not solve for this. Time alone does not absolve this. Time alone does not make history go away. It's like thinking that holding your breath is going to solve something in the next breath, or blinking your eyes when you open them again is just going to make that ugly thing disappear. It turns out that ugly thing is something that we have all been a part of, willingly, unwillingly, in part, in full, overtly, covertly. So myself as a person of color, as an Asian American, I have to interrogate myself. And I'm telling you, I've been walking around like an open wound these last couple of weeks with my own kind of PTSD, just like walking around like with a tripwire, where it's just all bubbling up at the surface. It's like pulling off a Band-Aid and realizing that that wound has not healed, that it was just covered up, but it has not healed. It is still raw and hurting and sick and festering, and it needs attention. And it requires an enormous amount of energy and emotional courage, even just to show my face and let my voice be heard in this medium. It requires a huge amount. And so I think I can only speak from my place as an Asian American, that I have experienced racism for all my life, because this face is always going to be Asian. You know, even though we've been given this fake position of power as the model minority, this model minority is like a paper certificate of whiteness. It comes with some privileges, but a very thick, like bomb-proof glass ceiling. Because this face is never going to be white. And if you've never gotten to know somebody who is non-white, maybe this might be hard to understand. But even people of color have bought in to some degree, drunk the Kool-Aid, that this myth of whiteness has value, or is an ambition, or is desirable. And really it's about opportunity and safety and privilege and power. And those in power tend to want to keep power no matter what. And there's many ways to keep power. There's many ways to institutionalize the hierarchy of power. And that hierarchy has existed for all of history. So we shouldn't expect it to not exist just because we're outraged in this moment. It does. A hierarchy does exist. The question now is what to do with it. So what I would recommend is to get real humble. Get real humble. And open your heart and open your ears with your entire body to practice active listening in a very real, heartfelt, whole body kind of way. It is not just with your mind. This is not an ideology. Racism is in our cells, and it's killing us as a nation. We are seeing our friends, people we care about, people we respect, die unjustly, uselessly, waste of life. And if they're not dying, if it's not totally existential, they're being tortured by the pressure of hatred and racism. They are being wounded and hurt by the lack of opportunity, by the lack of trust. This is a constant in our nation, and we have to reckon with it. We have to decide as a nation, as individuals, what we're going to do with it. We don't have to decide right now. Okay? You don't have to have the answers all right now. Right now, actually, it's really important to become a student and really be curious and learn. Because if the atmosphere you've been breathing and swimming in has been this mythology of whiteness, of white supremacy, then education is required. And it takes time. It takes time. It takes time to digest. It takes time to change what you have inherited. And nothing could be more important right now. We're all being called to do this. We're all being called to change our future for ourselves, for our children, for our friends, for the generations that come, for the planet. All these things are at stake. The stakes couldn't be higher. It is existential for us, for everyone, whether one admits it or not, because it affects all of our lives. Look at us. Locked up and quarantined, and suddenly feeling a little bit less out of control. and a little bit anxious and unsure. And you see the inequities in class and race and education and opportunities, and who benefits and who doesn't, and who's okay and who isn't. Who is like okay. Like, I'm okay. I'm like, I'm not like on vacation, but I feel like I can manage. I can manage. I'm going to be all right, and I have support. But there are lots of people in this world, our neighbors, our very neighbors, that don't have support, that don't have any backup, that don't have any safety net. There's nothing there for them. Everything they have got, they've worked really hard for, and it is so tangibly fragile that loss could happen at any moment, especially now. So the pressure cooker's been on with the coronavirus, the threat of this tiny little virus invading, and it takes like this cross-cultural, cross-economic divide that this tiny, non-human little virus invader is not. It's not personal. It's just it will treat humans equally. It is an equal opportunity virus, and yet the conditions of the human that the opportunistic virus encounters, whether that human is well-fed, well-resourced, well-slept, has access to healthcare, all of those things really make a huge difference when it comes to this contender, this virus we've never met before, and maybe never existed until this moment, until just a few months ago. So we have been in a process of awakening. We've been in a process of being uncomfortable. So we're all feeling the pressure, and then boom, people are dying unjustly. And we watch the murder of George Floyd with our very eyes, and we feel it in our bones. If you love humanity, you can feel his life slip away, being taken away unjustly. Just a complete abuse of power and waste of life. And it's painful. And we got to get real, and we got to flex those muscles in ourselves so that we can bear the discomfort of right now. Because if we can learn how to bear the uncomfortable quality of this moment, it will allow us to move forward, to make changes that are in alignment with our values. So this is how I'm getting back to practice. Our practice is a cultivation practice. It's focused on internal martial arts. So internal martial arts is it's an inward journey. And it's expressed outwardly as well, that the inward journey changes us on a cellular level, on an energetic, immeasurable level. And it is felt as we express our life in the world. That change emanates out from us. And we bring more consciousness and attention and intention to the process so that we become awakened to ourselves. We understand ourselves better. We understand how we react and respond to the world. And then we can make more clear choices, so that we are not just accepting, or we're not just responding as we've been, inherited, and we've been programmed through society and through taking for granted the structures that have been in place all of our lives. They're so familiar, we just don't even think about them. We don't think that one person of one color is more advantaged than another person of another color, that they are perceived as different qualities of humans and should be regarded differently. We don't think that that has been institutionalized, and we tend to, most people tend to reject that we could possibly be so mean-spirited as to do that. But there are many ways that we do this unconsciously. And it's really important that we clean up our behavior. The small harm, like death by 1,000 paper cuts, is still death. So what has been termed microaggressions or passive aggression, it's still harm. It's still harm. Whether you're conscious of it or not, doesn't absolve you of your responsibility. And it's important for us to awaken to that and to help each other awaken to that and hold each other accountable, not to punish. There's been enough hurt. There's been way too much hurt. It's time to hold ourselves accountable so we can heal and to create the space for healing, to create a language of healing, to create a language of verbal communication, of emotional communication, of intellectual communication, of physical communication, of energetic communication that holds each other with respect and safety. And the job starts with number one, ourselves. I think our first job is to make ourselves a safe person for other people to be around. I was listening to a Dharma teacher, Lian Shut. She's a Buddhist, Zen Buddhist teacher, a Vietnamese refugee. She was talking about the words refuge and refugee. And really, she was addressing the word refuge in terms of taking the precepts in Buddhism as the priority is making yourself a refuge for others. Make yourself a refuge so you can be at peace with yourself, so that your spirit can reside in your body, your soul can reside in your mortal flesh, and find peace and refuge there, and acceptance and safety, safe harbor. And from that place, you can provide refuge to others. And this in and of itself is one of the primary precepts when you take your Buddhist vows, whether you're Buddhist or not. You can still feel sort of elemental baseline importance of this to build trust. Safety and trust, they go hand in hand, right? Safety and trust. Trust is something that you earn. Safety is something you can provide. You don't necessarily get safety back, but you can provide safety and hope to get it back. And the more that we can provide this for each other, the more reciprocation of safety there can be. And this safety I'm talking about is not equivalent to being nice. I'm not talking about being nice. You can be nice. I like nice people. I like it when people are polite. I'm talking about providing safe harbor for ourselves and others so that we are not causing more harm. And if we are causing harm, because we will cause harm, we'll say the wrong thing, we'll put the thing in the wrong place, we will park in the wrong place, we'll touch each other with more aggression than we thought we intended to. We will look at each other with harming eyes. We will speak a mean word. You know, there's so many, those are all the mild things, but there are many other levels of this. But even the small things, just to address the small things, the things that we can truly change every single day of our lives, that we can start there with the small. We can start with the small, and the small changes the large. Okay? So that we provide safety, and the more we provide safety, the more we build trust. So when others trust us, don't betray that trust. True trust and safety is providing safe harbor for free. Okay? It's for free. It's an act of generosity, but it's also, you're acting in self-interest as well. Because if you can demonstrate safety to others, then that other person can reciprocate that safety to you, so you also benefit. Right? So this safety can happen in language, but it happens even before language. It happens in your internal dialogue, your internal language, and it happens internally in your own energy and in your very posture. So whether you're leaning forward and squinting your eyes, and you can be aggressing somebody in this way, or if you're in your own center, you're not leveraged out, you're in contact with yourself, you're okay with yourself. So you feel awake and engaged, you're listening, but you have a heart of stillness, a core of stillness within you. You can be listening, you can be dancing, you can be moving, you could be cycling, driving, whatever it is in a conversation. But if you have that connection to yourself, that core connection to a deep sense of calm and acceptance, this is what we practice. This is internal martial arts. This is internal cultivation. It's so that we practice a pathway back home, home in us, home that is your inheritance, that everybody has within themselves, that nobody can ever really take away. But sometimes we forget. So this pathway, this method, in our school, it just happens to be with internal martial arts and martial arts, that the language, the techniques, and the methods of returning ourselves to our center is felt and embodied. There are other practices that are more linguistic or more meditative or more physical even. But our practice is an embodied sense, so that our posture in the world confirms who we are in the world, our true selves, not a threatened self, not an anxious self, not a fearful self, but just the core, the essence of who we are. We practice a pathway to get back there with regularity, so that it's a familiar path. We're not breaking trail at age such and such, although it doesn't matter what age you start. Any age is appropriate for the beginning. Everybody gets to be a beginner. So wherever you're at, internal cultivation, that inward journey, right? It is not to separate yourself from the world. It's not to check out. It's a way to feel into and embody and stand in yourself in a very physical way. You're completely embodied and you feel unified and aligned. Every fiber of your muscles, every cell, every breath, every thought, all in alignment. And this takes practice. It takes a lot of practice. And you wander away, you get lost, but the practice is the pathway back home. So have realistic expectations for yourself. Don't expect yourself to be a genius in solving racism in, the next 10 minutes. That's not going to happen. Just have the courage, cultivate the courage to really be honest, to be really, really honest, to practice being a good listener, to not give advice when advice is not wanted or asked for, to really, really listen and be curious, and to be willing to change your mind. I really think that the internal martial arts is really about being a warrior for peace, because it takes a kind of like deep courage to just sit in your discomfort. And when you're talking about martial arts, you're not talking about getting comfortable, okay? Conflict is not about comfort. You can have comfort and you can have conflict, and you will experience both. And can you be yourself in both situations? Can you have access to yourself? The one that you feel is in alignment with your values, the one that isn't a split personality, the one that's not dissociated. Our practice is about full attention and awakeness to this moment. What is arising? The truth of this moment, the nature of reality. This is internal cultivation. It's not an abstract thought. It's not about going out there. And it's not about telling people how out there was and what a cool journey that was. It is not checking out. It's not about blissing out. It's not about just moving your body in some sort of qi dance. One of the things we have to be really careful about in the world of Taiji and Qigong is that it is not an escape. So do not misunderstand or misuse these practices as a mode of escape, even in the smallest way. The practice is about being fully human and having our place as a living being on Earth and in the cosmos. That the world is much bigger than ourselves. It's much bigger than our species. And we also are important and have a place and a role in the unfolding of this material and time. We have a role. You don't have to deserve that role. You are encouraged to fully inhabit that role. And I want to encourage you to check in to yourself about your reasons why you come to practice, to be really honest about that. If you're looking for a place to only experience happiness and joy, this isn't the place for you. This is the place to open yourself up and to practice the fullness of the human experience. So that means all the emotions have validity. All of the emotions, whether they are comfortable or uncomfortable, scary, not scary, happy, sad, angry, contented, all of them are valid and all of them are part of the human experience, and they should all be explored, not just one or two. Just happiness makes you a one-dimensional being. Just joy. That's just a one of the whole, color wheel of emotions. So if you're only looking to cultivate happiness, that's just like, it's not even like watching a black and white movie. It's just like watching a screen that is just one color. You only get only one emotion. That's not a mature human being. And that's not the full experience. You're ripping yourself off from the rest, from the really rich process of discovering yourself. And it takes a heart of bravery and courage to be able to go to those places that are uncomfortable, that are scary, that are terrifying, frightening, incredibly sad. All of those things take courage. And so you can think about that when you are cultivating, when you're doing your Qigong and Tai Chi practice, how it is a martial art dealing with conflict and challenge, especially in a relational way, but also in a solo way and also in a relational way. and how you can stay in your seat, how you can stay in your bones, how you can find your way back to your center and not collapse or not explode, that you can stay there. You're fully breathing, pulsing being of who you are, and get through the excruciating moments and still come out intact. Or even if you don't come out intact, you have a way of putting yourself back together. So you develop a skill set, and this develops resilience. This is true resilience. Resilience is not just like taking an energy shot and feeling upbeat for the rest of the day. That's just being stimulated. True resilience is like having a resource from within that knows that you are going to be able to survive difficult situations, that you have the capacity. You have the capacity to hold your friend who is in deep, deep pain. You have a capacity to hold that space for them. You have the capacity to hold them and not make it about your agenda at all, that it's not about you at all, that you can fully serve and you can fully be you as well. It doesn't take anything away from you. In fact, it might be enriching for you to be able to be generous and serve in this way. That letting go of your ego and your ambition can actually give something really nourishing back to you. It can remind you of your humanity. If you feel closer to your friend, and that connection creates a mutual energy that has its own life, that is life affirming and life giving, you can be there and be a good friend and practice good friendship and not feel like that takes anything away from you. But if you are in your center, that means it's like you're connected to your internal battery, right? That you are connected to your own internal power, and it's not dependent on the approval of somebody else. It's not dependent on somebody's permission. You have it. And if you forgot that you had it, you can find your way back. That you have a practiced way back. So I hope that you're able to cultivate this within yourself, and that gives you a deeper understanding that Qigong and Taiji are not just some exercise that is done just to make you feel good. That you can deepen your definition of what feels good. You can make that multi-dimensional definition, and you can see all the colors and experience all the emotions, and you can still find a way home to yourself and to be a good friend and treat each other with kindness. This requires a type of warriorship and courage from within, because you are exposed, you're showing yourself as a fully human being without armor, without armoring, without a costume, without a mask. That you are yourself, you're presenting you as you to the world, and you feel the value behind that, and you stand in it, and you stand up for yourself, and that means you can stand up for others, and you can stand with others. And I encourage you to do so, and wish you much self-love and softness, and to fill yourself with a heart of compassion so that you yourself can become a warrior for peace. I'll see you next time. Take care of yourselves and everyone.